Hello and welcome to my brand new episode of my brand new podcast called the OpEdia podcast. Of course, the word OpEdia doesn't exist in the dictionary, but it's just uh, an encyclopedia of opes which I'll be giving to you, which talks about you know uh, popular news stories which affects the millennials and the Gen Z, and I'll bring in my own personal opinion on the same news story. And just before I go any further, I just want to thank everybody who has been waiting for me, to start this journey. And I pray that as I start this journey today, that the channel will grow further and further on all different platforms. Either it is on social media, either it is on the podcast platforms, either it is on video platforms, and every other type of platforms. Because this is for you and not just for me alone. Yes, I'm doing this to enrich, to empower, to encourage, and to uh, do something that will encourage all of us, not just for me but for everybody who is watching me or who is listening to me. And I pray that as you listen to me, as you listen to this podcast, as you watch me on this podcast, that it gives you something, a food for thought that you can discuss with those whom you love and care about. And of course, the word OpEdia comes from the phrase oped. Oped means opinion editorial, which is so familiar with newspapers, and then with the IA from Wikipedia, where they put articles of lives of people, events, and so forth. So I combined those two together, and I made a portmanteau called OpEdia. Op ed ear, OPEDIA. Yes. So welcome once again to the OpEdia podcast. This is where I give my own opinions on a famous or a popular news story that has been happening recently, and I give my own opinion through this podcast as to the newspapers and the magazines and the blogs. So this is my own way of giving my own opinions, and whatever I say is my own opinion. You may take it or leave it, but this is just my own opinion, because at the end of it all, everybody has a right of expression and opinion, no matter which constitution of whatever nation you live in. Everyone has a right to expression. So yes, thank you once again. If you're watching me, thank you for being a part of it. If you are listening to me right now, wherever you are, thank you for being a part of this podcast. And so today, just want to take half an hour of your time, wherever you are, and just talk about something that has really hit me hard, and not just for me but for my generation, called the millennials and generation Z, which are just a generation ahead of me. And yeah, I'm sure most of you are aware of similar news stories concerning suicides, and is famously known by the deaths of famous millennials. So I just want to dig deep into the topic, which I titled Millennials and Suicides. Again, Millennials and Suicides. Now, just before I go any further, uh, all the opens that I'm going to do through this podcast is for the millennials and the generation Z. So it's going to be on different areas. Either it is to do with health, either it's to do with sports, either it's to do with entertainment, either it's to do with business, anything that is found worthy of talking about for this generation and generations to come, then this is the place where I'm going to share it out. And if you have any you know ideas or suggestions or topics that you want me to look at it, so long as it came from the news media, and you want me to give my own opinion on it and do deep research, then I'll let you know as soon as I put along the social media links and the pages by the end of this podcast. And you have all the time to send me your comments and suggestions on what next I should talk about in this podcast called the OpEdia podcast. So without further ado, as I said once again, thank you for tuning in or listening to me wherever you are, and let's go into the topic. The topic once again, millennials and suicides. Now, as you're all aware, there are three suicide deaths which happened in the space of 1 week, which happened last month in January. And if you look at it, uh, it affected the millennials generation. And just to go in order, it started in January 21st last month, 2022, where the son of the legend Regina King, called Ian Alexander Jr., committed suicide at age 26. He is a young man born in 1996, you know, uh, known for being the only child of Regina King. If I remember Regina King, if I hear her, it reminds me of the Boondocks, where she acted as both Riley and Huey Freeman, the children of Grandad. And she really did it spectacularly from the first season all the way to the last. And I know there's a revamp this year, we don't know when, but not only that do I know of her, but also she made a direct directorial debut in the movie One Night in Miami. And if you watch it, it's based on a true story. So she has really done a lot in the acting world as a black woman, Regina King. We are now losing our one and only son, and not just a son, a child called Ian Alexander Jr. Just few days after he turned 26. Man, that's very sad, and I just want to send my message of condolences to her and her family. And then 9 days, and then 5 days later, rather, the actor of The Walking Dead, Moses Moseley, passed away to suicide at 31 years old. And this is a man born in 1990. And I'm sure most of you have been following The Walking Dead. He has done a spectacular job acting in that role that was put in that series. So really sad to lose a crucial cast member of that famous series. And then 4 days later, after that announcement, the former Miss USA, Cheslie Kryst, committed suicide on January 30th. She died at the age of 30. A young woman born in 1991. She won Miss USA in 2019. You can remember very well, 2019 was a very good year for Black America in terms of the beauty pageants, whereby the four famous beauty pageant competitions were all won by women of color, young women of color. For the very first time, it has never happened before in Black America history. So losing also her is very shocking to the Miss USA world. And did you know that Cheslie was a lawyer, certified lawyer, at 30? She was just starting her life, man. I mean, it's so sad that you're losing these three millennials who will have done a lot for not just for America, but for the whole world in terms of their careers and their talents and their gifts. And I just want to talk about millennials and suicide. So without going any further, let me send my message of condolences to the families of the three who have lost their lives tragically to suicide in whatever way, shape, or form. I'm sure it doesn't matter, but it really hurts the families and those who care for them, and even as a nation, as a community, and as the whole world mourns with them. I just pray for strength, comfort, and peace as go through the trying period. And yeah, so I looked at a study from Hudson Therapy Group, which they released it 2 years ago. So I'll just be going into it, and I'll just give my own opinions or my own take of it. And I'm sure even as you listen to me, or you're watching me, you're going to give your own comments and just give your own take on what you have to say as I continue with this podcast. So I'll go from the beginning, and it says from Hudson Therapy Group. That's a disclaimer. It's not mine, it's from them. So I'll just read it as it is written. So as it says, according to them, Hudson Therapy Group, overall, suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, according to CDC report in 2020. However, it is the second leading cause of death among individuals from 10 to 34 years old. A recent article by Kazan, published in The Atlantic, highlights the concerning trend of increased suicidality and substance abuse among millennials. So I'm a millennial, I'm one of them. Even though I've not experienced this, I hope that what I'm going to share with you is going to save many lives of millennials around the world. So I hope that as you listen to me, as you watch me, it will give you a ray of hope or a ray of light to be able to get you out of that situation. So let me continue. Economic factors, the opioid epidemic, and the rise of social media all appear to contribute to the downturn of millennial mental health. So mental health has really been on the downward spiral for the millennials, and as mentioned in the study by Hudson Therapy Group, that economic factors, the opioid epidemic, and the rise of social media are some of the main factors that is causing many young people to commit suicide. And I pray that suicide will not be your answer to anyone who is listening to me or who is watching me, because suicide is not the answer. God has a greater plan for you. Yes, you may have gone through tribulations, but I pray that suicide will not be the answer. Somebody will come to your rescue, and even the Almighty God will save you from that situation. So of course, if you go if you break down every factor that is being outlined according to the study, yes, economic factors. Now, according to the study, it says that many millennials were directly impacted by the Great Recession of 2008. I'm sure most of you know about the Great Recession of 2008 and 2009, right? Where the whole world came crumbling down financially due to, the poor financial performances in the stock markets, which affected all industries or all sectors of the economy at a nationwide and global level. So you can imagine many millennials losing their jobs during that time and not getting employment, maybe due to redundancy or due to trying to save the company from a lot of financial losses, and the only way they can do it is use measures like redundancy and so forth. So you can imagine what the millennials are going to do in that period. So the study continues saying that while in past generations young adults were able to find jobs with relative ease, many young adults entering the workforce during this era found nothing. Which era am I talking about? The Great Recession of 2008 era. Moreover, many recent graduates had to move back home with their families due to the inability to cover living expenses. So you can imagine that being their fate, and I can't blame them. I can't blame the graduates for not catering for their families, because they had no job for them to really get them busy and making sure that they provide. So, and then it continues saying, now during the current pandemic, which all know is COVID-19, many people have experienced disruptions to career movement, delayed promotions, or even instances of unemployment. At this time, many millennials are at the prime position for career advancement, yet are unable to move forward due to the circumstances. So, look at it. Since COVID-19 came in, what have they experienced? A lot of disruptions to career movement. So maybe they're supposed to start their careers in 2020, or maybe they're supposed to launch something new or upgrade themselves, and then COVID-19 comes in. They have to cancel everything. So that really hurts them. If you look at delayed promotions, maybe they're expected to be promoted by early 2020 in whatever job or career that they do, but it had to be cut short. unemployment is the same way like the Great Recession, that when something happens, as a force majeure, then those are the consequences. You lose your jobs, your career is at a standstill. So, and since it's saying that they are at the prime position for career advancement, meaning this is the ripe age for them to really showcase their potential, and then things like that starts to cripple in, then of course unemployment comes in, worries about the future of their careers start to come in, and that is how millennials start thinking of suicide as the only option to end this suffering. But I know God did not create you and I to end up that way, because yes, everybody in this world goes through tribulations. Nobody out of the 8 billion people right now can say that they are living without troubles. Everybody has their troubles, but suicide should not be your answer. Amen. I'm preaching here, but yeah, let's go ahead with the study as it's mentioned. Now, Kazan also highlights that in American culture, job status is highly attached to our identities. So many people are being identified by their job status, and which I feel is not fair. That should not be your identity. That should not be your identity. You are way bigger than that. You are way more valuable than that. Following this mindset, feelings of underachievement or unemployment can bring about shame, guilt, and remorse. Now, that is the fate when you put your identity to your job status. That should not be so. You are way bigger than that. God has created you to be bigger than your job status. You are way more important than that. You are supposed to be the salt of the earth and the light of the world in whatever thing God has implanted in you through your gifts, talents, and abilities. Jobs are temporary, but your gifts and your talents are everlasting. I hope that has changed your mind in one way or the other as you listen to me or watching me right now. Now, the study continues to say that many young adults are also struggling with affording daily life costs. Kazan notes that many millennials feel as though they cannot carry out adult tasks such as owning a house, buying a car, or going on vacation due to financial strain. Now, because they cannot, go to their workplaces, they cannot, go back to their businesses, then these are the things that they'll have to undergo as a result, and I can't blame them for that. It's just a force majeure. Now, all of these factors combined can contribute to an overwhelming feeling of being behind and unable to catch up to planned goals. So that causes a delay in their pursuit for achieving their goals. And it's really unfortunate that millennials have to think of committing suicide because of this. And God does not like it that way. God has created all of us to be the best in everything that we do. It doesn't matter. So long as it's according to the will of the Lord, then that should be it. That should be your identity and not your job status. Now, second factor that is causing many millennials to have suicidal thoughts is the opioid epidemic. Now, I don't want to use that specifically because this is just happening daily. If I use it in another version, I call it substance abuse, meaning that even without looking at that particular factor which the study has been put in place, but if you look at substance abuse, if you look at the things that young adults are taking, whether it is heroin, whether it is amphetamines, whether it is fentanyl, whether it is even alcohol and all these things, I mean, they are saying that when you take those things, it gives them, highness, or it shows that they are man enough or that they are woman enough. Yet they all know that these are things that will encroach them into their traps, and that once they are in it, they cannot come out of it. And it's just basic common sense that if you take these things, it is going to affect your body organs, your internal body organs. And the young adults don't realize this. Why? Because maybe it is peer pressure, either it is, you know, trying to show their manhood or their womanhood, that they know everything in this world, yet they are just in their 20s or in their 30s. So I find that really, really saddening to see or to witness people going through that type of culture, and that culture is going to erode as years move by. And yes, and you all know very well, in America, young people, if it is not for suicides, then it is the opioid epidemic. You all know what opioids can do to your body, and if you do it repeatedly, there will be higher chances of deaths at a very young age. Yet, as the famous quote from a famous person, Les Brown, said, the richest people in the world are those located in the cemetery. Is that where you want to go as a young adult listening to me or watching me? Is that where you want to go, to be in the graveyard? Of course you don't want to go there, because that is where many lives are yet to realize their potential, only to lose their lives at a very young age due to different circumstances. So you who you think that substance, drugs like alcohol, cigarettes, heroin, opioids is what's going to make you valuable, is going to make you somebody of substance? Do you think that is what is giving you your identity? I don't think so. And even me, myself, who has never taken these things, will not want to even come near them. So, millennials, Gen Zers, if you're listening to me or watching me, please be careful with how you live your life, because your future is dependent on how you live your life right now. And even your future children and grandchildren who are yet to be born will be looking at you and wondering, why is your life like this? And then they'll paste on to their lifestyles and do the same. So please be careful on how you live your life, because your children, grandchildren, and great grandchildren will be looking up to you and will ask you those questions. So live wisely, live to your God given potential, and don't let those substances be the one determining your identity, or be the one determining your manhood or womanhood, because that is basically downgrading yourself, and God doesn't want you to be of that low standard. You are way higher than that. So excuse me. So yeah, substance abuse. And then the third factor, main factor, according to the study by Hudson Therapy Group, of course, is based in America. Just using that to bring into a perspective. Either you live in Africa, you live in Europe, or you live in Asia or Oceania or even South America. Just bringing it to a global perspective, because it's not only affecting America, it's also affecting all the continents of the world. So the third main factor that is making millennials go into suicide is the danger of social media. Now this, I don't need to look further into the study, because this is common sense. We all know very well social media has really done a lot of good, and at the same time a lot of bad for the young generation. Now a lot of good, if you look at on the good side, it has helped millennials to think outside the box and become more entrepreneurial, and you have seen many examples of famous people who have used social media to become who they are, as a celebrity or as an influencer and so forth. But at the same time, social media has reduced burdens of communication. If you can remember, when our parents were young, or when our grandparents were young, or even our great grandparents were young, they never had social media. Internet did not exist at that time. They used to use mail where they write it down, then they go to the post office, and then the post office sends it to the desired destinations. That is what they used to do. And even in terms of communication, they used to use the landline phones, or specific phone places where they go and they pay a certain amount to go and talk to somebody. That is what they used to use by then. But now in this generation where it is dominated by the internet, social media is the way forward, and you've seen it do a lot of benefits for that generation. But if you look at the negative side, it's the same thing as drug substance abuse, whereby it is peer pressure, or maybe it is due to pressure of expectations, and when they don't meet them, they start shutting down their social media pages, and suicidal thoughts start crippling into their minds. But as I've said, the danger of social media is really apparent and it's increasing. So guys, once again, be careful on how you use your social media. Use it for the right purpose, and you're going to save your life and those whom you love. So yeah, the danger of social media, I don't need to look into the study because that is just common sense. uh, and then isolation, the fourth factor. How isolation really makes people go that way, the route of suicide. Maybe COVID-19 has made them to become isolated because of the lockdowns, maybe because of the measures taken place for somebody who is COVID positive, and maybe they have been staying home alone for a year or two because of the repeated lockdowns by the national government, and has really hurt them so much. Why? Because they cannot go out to meet their buddies, their loved ones, or even meet their family members because of the severity of the pandemic. And it's very understandable, because the health ministries of a respective nation really wants to save their citizens, really wants to save everybody, and they are doing whatever they can to make sure that the pandemic doesn't go any further. So that's why they had to introduce lockdowns. But on a personal level, I'm sure whoever is watching me or listening to me is not used to isolation. They're used to friendliness, they're used to going to parties, they're used to doing all those kind of things, and things like that. Isolation due to the pandemic is what they are not used to. And until now, there are some nations around the world that are still using lockdowns to be able to put people back home and do everything at home, and I'm sure some of them are not used to that lifestyle, and that is one thing that is increasing their chances of suicides. Yeah, so isolation is another main factor. Now, what are the outcomes? Going back to the study, millennials as a whole are suffering. According to Kazan, they experience close to twice the rate of anxiety disorders compared to baby boomers. Now, if you remember baby boomers, those are the people who are born during the 60s and the 50s combined. Moreover, the mortality rates of millennials are significantly higher compared to those in Generation X at that same age. Alcoholism and drug use is also a concern for millennials, due to increased overdoses as well as instances of individuals in their 20s and 30s passing away due to alcoholic liver disease, which generally develops later in life. So those are just uh, the outcomes of the factors leading to suicide. And then, of course, just before I end this podcast, which I have very few minutes left, the last thing, there has to be a silver lining at the end, right? Now, what can we do as a generation? I don't need to look into the side because this, once again, is common sense. What are the preventive measures? Because as the famous proverb says, prevention is better than cure. Number one, if you are listening to me or watching me right now, seek help, professional help, because God has put in place professional people who can deal with suicide, who can deal with suicidal thoughts. And if you seek professional help sooner, then the better for you. Number two, talk to your family members. You may not afford to go to a professional help, but at least talk to your family member, either through your phone, either through word of mouth, either through social media, whatever it is. Talk to your loved one, because those are the only ones who know you more than any other person outside the family home, and they'll share with you even things that you don't know about, but it can save your life. And then number three, share it to the, to your friends, outside your family home, because they also know you more than you know yourself. So all this together is basically one one outcome: reaching out. Be open, because you never know, somebody could save you. Maybe that day you wanted to commit suicide, but because you've just reached out, because you've opened up yourself, then your life is being spared. And I know God wants you to come out of that situation of suicide. So that's all that I had to share with you. And by the way, if you want to comment on this op-ed that I've just talked about, do so in the respective social media pages, which I'll put it later after this is being put across on all platforms. Otherwise, thank you for listening to me, and I hope this has enlightened you, this has empowered you. Have a good day.